HIV as the country's leaders were in denial about the issue. We lagged far behind the rest of the world in our response, and although antiretroviral treatment was already available to treat HIV and prevent mother-to-child transmission, we were not availing ourselves of these medicines. There was no cohesion between key stakeholders, renowned scientists and civil society. We're at odds with government. This is an honest admittance made by the Minister of Health, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, in an article published in the Mail and Guardian last weekend, in a week preceding the 21st International AIDS Conference in Durban. Today on Rights and Recourse, we examine the road traversed in the fight against HIV and AIDS in South Africa and the rest of the continent, with a strong focus on the human rights around those living with HIV and AIDS. But first, let's have a look at this insert.
And I actually don't like it, whether you call them blessers, which is a new term, or sugar daddies, which has been there for quite some time. I just don't like that phenomenon. But what we have done is that this is scientific research, by the way. In Southern and Eastern Africa, it has found that in 14 countries in that region, the two regions, of Southern and Eastern Africa, there are 5,000 new infections per week in the age group of young girls, girls and young women, in the age group 15 to 24. And unfortunately, half of those are occurring in South Africa. Now, the phenomena are very complex. So we, on the 24th of June, the Deputy President, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, launched what we call whole government, whole community program, where we are targeting at young girls and young women in that age group, plus the men who infect and impregnate them. There are 5 objectives really. Firstly, reduce the incidence and prevalence of HIV/AIDS among them. Secondly, reduce the incidence of teenage pregnancy, because they are also bedeviled with teenage pregnancy. Thirdly, keep them in school for as long as possible. Fourthly, reduce gender-based violence and sexual violence among them, because they are victims of that. And lastly, link them to skills and employment opportunities, if possible, in economic opportunities rather, so that you reduce their dependence on people who will offer them money. So there are 5 different objectives, and the one you call sugar daddies or blessers is only the 5th one. So we take them wholeheartedly. I wouldn't like the program as dealing with blessers, because it's dealing with a whole range of socio-economic issues that they are faced with.
The Minister of Health, Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, there giving a background to what we are about to discuss. To discuss today's topic, we are joined in the studio by Mr. Amukelani Maluleke, National Organizer from the Treatment Action Campaign. And later from our Pretoria studio, we'll be joined by Dr. Jürgen Pillay, Deputy Director General, HIV and AIDS, TB and Maternal, Child and Women's Health in the Department of Health. Amukelani, whilst we're waiting for Dr. Pillay, thank you very much. Welcome to Rights and Recourse.
Thank you very much for hosting us.
Thank you for coming at short notice. If I said earlier, I read a quote from a statement published by the minister, and one of them was the country's leaders were in denial. How differently have we performed since those days, as the minister was talking about?
Thank you very much. I think from 2000, when we were in conference in 2000, our focus was much on the issues of treatment, because there was no access to treatment then. Then 16 years after, we're back in Durban. We have treatment. As the country, we have the biggest ARV program in the whole world. That on its own suggests that there's been inroads in terms of making sure that we have got access to treatment. It is a fact that in 2000, yes, we had treatment available, not to South Africans, because that was the era of your former President Thabo Mbeki and the late Minister of, which they were calling in for your veggies, and then you'll remember your beetroot, garlic, and all that. We had a lot of people dying in that period. So we can say, of course, there's new inroads, because the current leadership of government, it's leading us towards access to treatment for all, which then in 2000 it was a different case altogether. There was a denialism. Of course, we're dealing with that, and the government is dealing with that. But for now, what are the key issues? I think we need to look into what are the key new inroads that we need to focus on now. We fought for treatment. Now it's a new agenda altogether.
I just want to. I want us to go to the new issues that I'm asking in this program. But what I want to go back to the issue of food in a country and in a continent that is dire poverty, and I think you can't take the medicine on an empty stomach.
Which that is a fact. But what was the key issues that we needed by then was the treatment, because having treatment was the only way that was suggesting people will live long. It was not only issues of food. Today we're still living in poverty, but with treatment, life expectancy has risen up. So it's not only the issue of food. It is making sure that government provide treatment for poor and all the people in the communities. So of course it's a different era. But our key issue today is now that government is providing social services, which is through your social development and all that, that is a cover-up for poverty. What are we doing for people living with HIV? We need to make sure that treatment is available for all people living with HIV. And today, like the minister was saying on the statement, the programs of test and treat and all that, it's an inroad towards that, to say whoever is found to be HIV positive need to start having treatment, which is a different case today altogether. But that's the issue. Denialism was there. We managed to defeat it, and it's a new era altogether. Hence, we're calling for new things.
The other issue for me, I listened to the minister saying in southern and eastern Africa, there's still huge. It is spreading unabated, and you can actually base that solely on an impoverished continent.
The 5,000 that the minister is talking about, the new infection, 5,000 new infection per week amongst young people, I think that is the other reason why in Durban, as the treatment action campaign, we're calling for condoms in schools. We have young people that are spending more than 8 hours in school, but infection is rising every day. The big question we're asking was to say, when are these young people having sex? If they're spending 8 hours in school, 4 hours doing their homeworks and 12 hours and sleeping and resting, and the following morning they go to school, when are they having sex? That on its own suggests that all these things are happening at the school level. Hence we're saying that if we are to win prevention, we need to make sure that the resources are available where they are needed. If young people are the one getting infected, 2,500 in South Africa a week, that suggests that we need to have prevention resources, methodology, programs at a school level.
The other question the minister was talking about in that insert was the issue of blessers and sugar daddies, and saying this is rife, especially among school children. They target school children.
I think this is a trending issue that as citizens we need to start taking care of it. We cannot afford to have the new concept of blesser trending. Because that on its own violates the rights of young people. That on its own suggests that those who are in poverty, those young people who are in poverty, need to succumb to this blesser concept so that at the end of the day they can end up being infected. So we need to, as activists, as the civil society leaders, we need to make sure that we have programs that respond to this. We cannot only call for the civil society leaders. We're calling for all the communities to ensure that they stand up for their own rights and defeat the blesser concept. We know that it's a blesser concept in a rural community. They're calling it a different issue altogether. In KZN, they call it, this marriage that they call it. It's still a blesser concept to me. Uktwala. It's still a blesser concept to me. You go to Botswana, it's the same thing, virginity test and all that, and after that you get married because of all that. It is a concept that we need to deal away with, because why are we saying this? We're saying this because young people cannot stand up for themselves. If a young person whom in this new concept we're calling a blessee tend to be given resources, they cannot really negotiate for safer sex. How do they say no to sex, to unprotected sex, if you're given all these luxuries that we're talking about in the blesser community? So we are saying, as the Treatment Action Campaign and other civil society leader and the activists across the globe, that the blesser concept needed to come to an end. We need to find ways to defeat it. We need to make sure that at our school level, we training our young people to be responsive on this blesser issue.
Well, if you'd like to join us on today's discussion, please call us on 011 714 5497 or 5498. Alternatively, you continue tweeting at Recourse. You can also send us an email and tell us which other stories you would like us to cover here on Rights and Recourse. We'll be back after the break.
News Today keeps you informed with news locally and around the world.
When Judge John Hlophe challenged the Supreme Court of Appeal when it sent the matter back and said that there must be an inquiry set up.
We unpack business news.
There's an increase in general inflation in the country.
We give you up-to-date news of the day.
The drugs were seized at several locations in Sydney, including a shipping container sent from Hong Kong. Police say it's the largest haul of illicit drugs in 2 years.
We round up sports news.
Kotata, tell me about the legacy that you would like to build and be remembered for.
Trying to get my foundation running, which is going to focus on, all the sport, doesn't matter disability or able body. So, I'm passionate about sports.
Stay informed every Monday to Friday from 3 to 5:30 p.m. CAT. SABC News.
My first visit to South Africa was back in 1997. At that time, I really didn't have much awareness about the AIDS crisis. I was focused on Microsoft and helping to close the digital divide, excited about what computers could do to empower people. But as I took a computer into Soweto and looked around and saw the challenges there, I realized that computers alone wouldn't solve a lot of the world's critical problems. In that year, already 3 million South Africans were living with HIV, with 2,000 more being affected every day. And of the people living with HIV, more than 2/3 were in sub-Saharan Africa. So you could say my visit to Soweto was eye-opening, and it started a learning process that led to Melinda and I dedicating our foundation to global health, particularly HIV and tuberculosis. Well, today we can checkpoint where we are, both the progress and the challenges in front of us. And I think it's daunting but important to see the magnitude of the task that remains in front of us. The reality is, while we have ambitious, laudable goals, achieving them is going to be very difficult. Well, first, let me focus a bit on the progress that I think you're all aware of. When this conference was last in Durban back in 2000, just a few thousand people in Africa were receiving treatment. And the fact that that number has now grown to over 12 million is an incredible accomplishment.
Standing by. Well, Bill Gates there, the computer magnate, talking about his first visit to South Africa. And I think he says at the time when he came to South Africa into 1997, only 3 million people in South Africa were already living with HIV and AIDS. And probably we should thank people like yourselves, TAC, for spreading the gospel.
I think that is one thing that when we went to the conference in 2000, our focus was to ensure that the 3,000 that is talking about need to start having treatment. And
3 million.
3 million, so to say. My apology for that. 3 million. Those are the people who are supposed to start receiving treatment. It is, of course, disturbing, but we can call it progress. That we sitting in South Africa today having 3.4 million in treatment. So that on its own it's an achievement, but we still need to make sure that we retain those people on treatment. We still need to make sure that those people are taken care of. What is it that we're saying when we say that as TAC? We're actually saying that there need to be programs that service these people. There need to be programs that ensure that there is adherence on treatment. These people need to continue taking their treatment. They need to have support structures. One support structure that is critical, it's community healthcare workers. For us to have the biggest ARV program in the whole world, but we do not have a support structure, a physical support structure like your community healthcare workers, it is a problem. Because who is talking to these people on the daily basis? Who is supporting them beyond medication, beyond treatment? Because you might be providing treatment. These people continue to need that physical treatment, that engagement on the daily basis, which the community healthcare workers are the wing to do that.
There's something else that disturbs me around the prevalence of HIV and AIDS in Africa, and that 2/3 of the people in south of the Sahara in Africa are living with HIV and AIDS, and this figure doesn't seem to change.
As part of the submission to this conference was to say we cannot win the war against HIV if our health systems are not strengthened. You'd understand that in the SADC region, we have health systems that are in shambles, that are not having enough resources to cater for people living with HIV. I think that is one reason why people are not taking this bit serious, because of the resources that are not being provided for the services that people need. I mean, you can see it's 70% of death on that. What is it that we can do to prevent all these deaths? Today, 1.1 million people are still dying of HIV. Hence, we are saying if you are to give people treatment at an early age or at an early stage, that on its own will help people to live long. We counting numbers. I think this is one question that in most sessions we're asking. To say we're counting numbers. And we also supposed to be subtracting numbers. We're adding numbers, but people 1.1 is dying, and we continuing saying we have 3.4. I mean, we have 15,000 people and 15 million people in the world in treatment, but 1.1 is dying. What does that mean? I think this conference was for us to set a new agenda.
I was sorry to interrupt you there. One of the other things that concerned me, 2 weeks ago, I was following up what is happening, or last week, I was following what was happening at the AU summit. I didn't see any word around HIV and AIDS at that summit.
Right. I think you might have seen the memorandum that we submitted during the march that we had. We had about 8,000 to 10,000 people filling the street of Durban. Part of that was to say who is adopting these declarations. We are happy for the 90-90-90 strategy, but we asking questions to say, okay, how do we reach all these 90-90-90-90? Because this declaration does not really speak to some of the things that the guidelines are talking about. So for us, of course, that is a worrying factor. Hence you saw the global activists in the conference calling for the same things, to say we had a high-level meeting, but we never had a high-level discussion, which include the issues of the AIDS conference. But we are happy that the researchers came out to say these are the things that we need to start talking about. We are happy to say that the researchers were calling onto our call to say we need to engage activists, we need to have advocacy, we need to make sure that civil society organizations, advocacy group, activists are receiving funding so that they can be able to push forward this mission of HIV and AIDS.
My question earlier was the AU had a summit. All the African countries were together in Kigali, in Rwanda. And I don't remember seeing this discussion on the agenda?
The part of the people who were there, there are things that I don't want to talk about, but let me just talk about that. We have civil society leaders that represent civil society organizations in the globe that then are invited to sit with these people in their discussions. These are the people that are supposed to make sure that whatever declaration is signed has the issues of civil society in that space. But we have a problem where civil society organizations civil society leaders are not representing civil society organizations. What I mean by that is you have a civil society leader that goes to the UN meetings and attend the UN meetings, but they're representing their own interests rather than representing the interest of the civil society organization to ensure that these discussions that you're talking about are being discussed in such platforms. I think that is one critical issue. For us to continue having high-level discussion at that level, we need to ensure that civil society organizations or those who are dealing with human rights are then into that space, pushing in the agenda of the communities to ensure that issues of it's not only research discussed, it's also issues of the community being discussed at that level, so that the HIV response can speak to the challenges from the ground, not rather than speaking to the challenges at the high level only. Because at that level, it's issues of research, issues of your patent laws that we're still going to talk about in this, which does not speak to the current challenges. The current challenges, we need to have a link between the health facility and the community. We need to have sustained program for people living with HIV. We need to make sure that we retain people living with HIV on treatment for them to live long. How are we doing that? We need to do that. We need to push such agenda by having civil society represented in such space.
Well, we still say if you'd like to join us in today's discussion, you can call us on 011 714 5497 or 5498. Alternatively, you can tweet us at Rights Recourse. When we come back, we'll dwell on the issue of human rights. Stay with us.
Long, we celebrate those who take strides doing good and changing the world.
I really think that education has to be revisited, and it's an integral part of teaching young people skills of the future.
There's always light at the end of the tunnel.
I think that the treatment should be made available, actually, because it's costly. Growth hormones are very costly.
Where there is a challenge, we bring hope.
I'm alive. And the brain tumor is gone.
Join your host Buleng Mulabati every Friday at 17:30 for more uplifting stories.
A lot more Africans are getting smartphones.
We've got 150 million people using mobile devices in this country.
This means internet connectivity is increasing. That results in access to information. Some are using social media to share new African narratives through campaigns.
The friend says, oh, I'm seeing this thing on Facebook. Where is it happening? At Yege Stadium, everybody goes there.
On Network, we tell you how Africans are staying connected. We also have new gadgets, games and social media news. That's Network with Ms. Pumelele Zondi every Sunday at 19:30 Central African Time.
Years ago, Nkosi Johnson was the voice of the vulnerable young people who tried to capture our attention. Let us for one moment imagine what may be going on in his space today. We take a peek into heaven and we see Nkosi sitting next to former President Nelson Mandela watching us. How will they react to the progress that has been reported thus far? They will certainly not jump out of their seats and dance with joy. Smile, they certainly will. We came here to talk about access to HIV prevention, treatment, and care. We came here to talk about equity and human rights. And we came here to speed up the pace, to demand change now. First, with respect to access to HIV prevention, treatment, and care, there's significant progress towards eliminating HIV transmission from mother to child. In addition, there is progress in developing biomedical HIV prevention interventions such as medical male circumcision, PrEP, PEP, and condom distribution. While the biggest challenge facing the conference in 2000 was access to AIDS treatment, the biggest challenge facing AIDS 2016 conference is the relentless spread of HIV, especially among young women. 3 studies by Caprisa were presented here with new information on high rates of HIV infection in young women in South Africa, resulting from the cycle of HIV transmission, which involves age-disparate sex.
Dr. Olive Shisana, they're the co-chair of the conference down in Durban, the 21st International HIV and AIDS Conference. Before I go to her reference to Nkosi Johnson, what makes HIV and AIDS a human rights issue?
I think the first thing that I'd like to talk about is people living with HIV have all the rights, like any other human being, as they are in the Constitution. But the key issue that I'd like to talk about is issues of rights to privacy and rights to non-interference, which is there in the Constitution. What do we mean by rights to privacy? If I am diagnosed and I'm HIV positive, if I want it to be my own, within my own privacy, not to be known to anyone, it is within my rights to keep my status to myself. I think that's one common element.
You know, something when my apologies, when I was researching this topic, somebody said to me, you know, you go to a clinic and the nurses at the clinic are saying, all those with HIV, this side.
I think we were one of...
It's not a laughing issue though.
It is not. I think we were one of the organizations that called for the people living with HIV not to wait for long in the queues in clinics, without thinking, of course, that it might cause this discrimination and all that, because the person is just there to collect treatment, and you queuing with other 200 people. You know what you're there for. You don't need all these other things. It becomes a problem when facilities start to speak that language, because that language on its own is discriminatory. You can have your container, of course, for TB and HIV patients, hence we say integration of TB and HIV, just to try and eliminate some of these things. But it's so wrong for the health workers to start to speak that language. So I think that's why we're talking about privacy and non-interference. The other one, it's we have a right not to be discriminated against because of our status, and which is a key one. We know that stigma and discrimination is still private there, and all that we need to do is to continue to remind people of the Constitution, to say people living with HIV are like any other person on the street. And then the rights that are there in the Constitution covers each and every individual. But the other key issue that I would like to flag on this interview is access to healthcare services, which is Chapter 7, Section 27 of the Constitution, which then says that you need to have access to the healthcare services, including treatment, care, and support, and all that, which is one key that if then you go to the facility, which is no longer like the way it used to be 2 years ago, issues of treatment, stockouts, and all that. Of course, we need to salute where it's due. I think there's progress on that. If you go to the facility and you are there for treatment, you find that there's no treatment, that right, it's then not looked into, because you're supposed to have access to services and you're not accessing services. So we're saying that these are the elements that makes HIV a human rights. you have right to life. And the only thing that will make you live long is ARVs. And then if you're not provided ARVs, that right is then not looked into. So all these things speaks to that. Apart from being a human being and all that, access is the key.
Dr. Chisana made a reference to Nkosi Johnson. Nkosi Johnson in 2000 made the following statement. My name is Nkosi Johnson. I am 11 years old. I have full-blown AIDS. I was born HIV positive. Care for us. We are all human beings. We are normal. We have hands. We have feet. We can talk. And we have needs just like everyone else. To what extent did this statement affect the mood in the conference?
I think I was sitting in that hall when she was giving that closing statement. The mood was, I think the hall was so quiet because it was a reflection. Even though when we went there, we knew that 2000 Nkosi Johnson was there and all that. But for EMEAFEC, I think there were so many articles before the conference that were written by so many people like your Ansu Thompson and all that. She wrote an article about that. But when Dr. Olive presented that, the mood was so quiet in the conference because it was talking to issues of human rights, to say we are human beings. We have hands, we talk, but now that it's like that, how do we link it to the current situation? I think most activists, most of the civil society leaders, most of the researchers were asking themselves, I'm just thinking, they were asking themselves questions to say, what are the key issues now? How do we link this conference to this statement? Is to say that we human beings. You can do all the research you do. You can discuss all the methodologies you discuss, but you need to make sure that at the end of the day, we are human beings and we have rights, and we need to have access to what the Constitution says we need to have access.
There's a poignant moment in the conference when Justice Edward Cameron was delivering the Dr. Jonathan Mann lecture during the conference. He makes the point that AIDS exposes our terrible human vulnerability and brings to the fore prejudices. He also touched a raw nerve when he requested the conference to pause for those who died. Because it's easy to forget somebody who's died.
I think it goes back to the statement I made earlier on, to say we're talking about numbers. And we forget that there are those who died. And then when he made such a statement, he was actually saying that we can talk about treatment, but we also need to talk about prevention. We also need to make sure that we stop these infections that are continuing. I mean, for the young girls, 2,500 young people on the weekly basis, you multiply that by 12, you give an annual number, that is a very big number. So that on its own, for us as activists, it was saying that they can do whatever they do, research and everything, but we need a program that speaks to prevention. We need to make sure that we prevent unnecessary death. We know that most of deaths are as a result of your non-adherence and that. Most deaths are as a result of people not taking treatment according to the way they're taking treatment. Some they don't choose. It's because they go to the facility in Sub-Saharan, they just go to the facility and there's nothing. So we need to make sure that these deaths are prevented. I think that is, for us, that was a key message to say we can talk about treatment, but there need to be prevention program. We cannot always say we need to add numbers and numbers and numbers up to 20 million that we're calling for in that conference, whereas we are not talking about the new prevention.
Well, we had hoped that we are going to be joined by Dr. Jürgen Pillay from the Department of Health. It seemed to me that Dr. Jürgen Pillay is not there. We'll continue as usual. If you'd like to join us in today's discussion, you can call us on 011 714 5497 or 5498. Alternatively, tweet us at Recourse. You can also send us an email with your thoughts about this program and many others. Stay with us.
News Today keeps you informed with news locally and around the world.
when Judge John Hlophe challenged the Supreme Court of Appeal when it sent the matter back and said that there must be an inquiry set up.
We unpack business news.
There's an increase in general inflation in the country.
We give you up-to-date news of the day.
The drugs were seized at several locations in Sydney, including a shipping container sent from Hong Kong. Police say it's the largest haul of illicit drugs in 2 years.
We round up sports news.
Kotata, tell me about the legacy that you would like to build and be remembered for.
Trying to get my foundation running, which is going to focus on, all the sport, doesn't matter disability or able body. So, I'm passionate about sports.
Stay informed every Monday to Friday from 3 to 5:30 p.m. CAT. SABC News.
Rights and Recourse as we tackle the issues that were discussed at the 21st International AIDS Conference with Amukelani, what's her name again? Malulek. My apologies. Amukelani, the other question for me is the issue of the discrimination of sex workers. I think it came to the fore very strongly. I seem to remember in March of this year, the Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, addressed a group of sex workers.
I think that is one of the, if you can check on the 10 stands of the AIDS conference for this year, it's sex workers, it's one of those. We supported the activists and on that length. I think their demands were fair to say, okay, how do you then identify a sex worker today? If then there's still illegal for them.
There's been a lot of talk, especially from the Deputy President then and even now, about the decriminalization of sex work.
Which is not yet. We can talk about that, but it's still not yet. And we want to identify and support. We have all the programs, we have all the guidelines that speaks to that, but the law, it's not yet into that. So I think we need to arrive at a point where we are able to identify with sex workers rather than identifying with sports, because today we're talking identifying sex workers by the mere fact that they are working in this area, and still when you go to that area there's a number of police that is scouting for them. Then how do we then tend to help them? How do we tend to say we're giving them enough resources to protect themselves from the virus? How do we then protect their rights? Because it's still a problem. So I think we need to arrive at a point where we start about the law and decriminalizing sex work. It becomes so that we are able to, okay, today when you were to drop the condom, you just go to the spot and give them, but you don't even know who you're talking to. People cannot come out to say.
You mean people who should be working among sex workers are health workers, social workers, and those kind of things?
We have a lot of programs that are working towards that. Your sweat program and all that. And we have activists that are pushing forward for the realization of sex workers within the justice system, which is one thing that we need to start talking about. But all I'm saying is we can have all innovative ideas around that, but as long as we haven't started implementing the law, it becomes a problem.
In other words, decriminalizing sex.
I think that is the key issue. I think we all as activists clap hands when the Deputy President was launching that program. But we had, obviously this question was at the back of our skull, to say then what is the way forward? How do we then tap into that space? Because tapping into that space today means that we have this organization that is dealing with this program. But how do we then stop police force from intimidating these people where they are working?
I think to an extent, to the deputy president mentions in the speech, because I read the speech before I came here, mentioned in the speech that there is a subcommittee of cabinet that has social development and justice and probably police. I'm not sure whether the police are there that are looking at this issue.
Part of the outcomes of the conference within the civil society space was to say that we need to push forward this. We need to make sure that this is fast track, so that we're able to service and make sure that issues of prevention programs and then supporting sex workers. But we acknowledge the committees, we acknowledge what is happening, but we need a program that will allow these people within their space to access services without being discriminated. I think if you can check most of the pictures of the AIDS conference, especially in the plenary area, if it was not the treatment action campaign, it was the sex workers with their umbrellas and all that, because they wanted their voice to be heard, to say, this is what we need. And we were there standing with them when they were calling up for the law to be visible on this matter. We support and salute the inroads by the deputy president, but we need to fast track the justice system part of it to make sure that they are being supported in due course.
In an article, Human Rights campaigner Mark Haywood, which you have referred to, which was hailed by Justice Cameron, where he says, I quote, "We have medically tamed AIDS, but we have not tamed the social and political determinants of HIV, particularly the overlapping inequalities on which it thrives, gender education, access to health care, access to justice, and that is why prevention strategies are not succeeding."
Thank you. I'd look into all the issues he spoke about. He spoke about gender education, which is part. If we were to deal with issues of HIV, we need to make sure that women are equal into this. We still have communities that view male as males and females as females, which is a challenge. There's no equality on this issue. So for women to negotiate safer sex, for women to be protected, they need to be gender equality and education on that. Access to healthcare services. I think I spoke to that to say our health systems need to be beefed up. They need to be able to have the capacity to give out the number that we have, the treatment that we're talking about. So if we have health systems that are in shambles, we are not able to service the communities, and communities need to be welcomed into the facility. They need to get what they need to get at the facility level. I think out of the statement, we can give you Free State as an example. I mean, if you have about 1/4 of your professional healthcare workers resigning. Doctors are not resigning because they want to resign. They're resigning because there are no equipment in that province. They want to work, but they cannot work. Community healthcare workers are being victimized and taken out to the health system. How do you have a health system that cannot provide adequate services to its own population? I think that is one issue that Mike Haywood was talking about here. Access to justice. I would love to refer to one case of the silicosis, TB silicosis that I think it was trending a few weeks ago. That is the access.
We also had a program about that. And also at the same time, now that we talk about silicosis, I want to go to what's happening on the mines. I know Anglo-American was a big sponsor of this conference, but what are they doing on their mines?
Yes. I think just to give a perspective on that, this is the justice we're talking about. People need not to be discriminated because of their socio-economic status and all that. You need to access justice irrespective of your socio-economic status.
Can you continue with this line of talk when we come back from a break? If you'd like to join us, you can still call us on 011-714-5497 or 5498. And that's precisely why we thought we needed somebody from the Department of Health here today, because of the issues Amukelani raised around the Free State issues. I know the chairman of TAC raised this issue at the conference very strongly, even mentioned the name of the MEC from the Free State. Stay with us. Don't go away.
Hindu devotees took a holy dip at Sangam, the confluence of rivers Ganges. People and priests made their way to the banks before the break of dawn. Security arrangements were in place for police forces patrolling on the river banks to ensure smooth functioning of the event.
A mobile museum in India's West Mumbai is highlighting the skills and creativity of residents of one of Asia's largest slums.
That's what we've been doing here, is creating this platform, and we came here to help it develop and to, just build it up.
Children's rights and health are a priority in the journey of good health.
All children should have access to adequate health care, not only curative but preventative as well.
How to identify ADHD on children.
ADHD is a childhood disorder which manifests with the symptoms of hyperactivity, impulsivity, and/or inattention.
Is breastfeeding still a vital nutrition to babies even today?
Breastfeeding for the first 6 months of life is absolutely crucial.
Catch Health Talk with Dr. Sello Mutawung every Saturday from 9 till 10 a.m.
Welcome back to Rights and Recourse as we continue our discussion on the conference on HIV and AIDS. Amukelani, there is a story coming out of the United States, the Mississippi baby. And I saw this thing and I wanted to find out, what is this Mississippi baby? A story coming out of there said the Mississippi baby born in July 2010 was born HIV positive, and doctors started treating her with a combination of zidovudine, lamivudine, and nevirapine. And she's alive, I'm told. We haven't seen this miracle in Africa.
I think part of that happened in 2010, and I think there were. You'll remember that on the story, the child, during birth, the mother took the child with her, and they went back home, and they were supposed to be attending your clinical trials and all that, but the child was not taken back to such trial for about 5 times. When the child comes back into the clinic after on your 6th time, and it was realized that the virus was undetectable, which it was shocking because it's not something that people were used to. And then that on its own, the researchers started to make a call to say, I think there needs to be something that needs to be done on this. After 18 months, the child was found that she's still positive. And then in the long run again, which I think it was only a 24-month, the child was found that the virus was undetectable again, which is a case that most researchers are interested in. You remember in 2013 there was a study that was made as well along the same lines, that what is it that we need to do in the globe to make sure that we keep trends and of paper trail of all these things, because that was a surprising story. From the treatment literacy point of view, I think it's only surprising that because the child was not taking any treatment from the word go up until 18 months and all that, which is undetectable, only happen when you're taking treatment, and this child was not even taking treatment for that period. So I think we would support such type of research, so that we learn new things and we are able to prevent mother-to-child transmission. You'll remember that the child get infected during birth. The whole period, the mother-to-child transmission was looked into. But we will support such research to take course within the global space so that we have new lessons.
There's another thing which is a danger in this. The UNAIDS and South Africa are talking about 2030 as the year when HIV and AIDS should be eliminated. And the other problem, of course, is funding.
I think that was a strong message in the conference that we, when in 2000 when we were matching the way resources to buy in treatment and tools. Today we have tools and treatment, but we do not have money which is a paradigm shift. So I will speak on the side of the civil society to say the funding has shrinked in such a way that we are unable to continue linking the population to the facilities is what we do best. I mean, with the eye of the citizens. For us to continue doing what we do best as activists, to advocate for the availability of resources, system strengthening, active citizenship and all that, we need funding, which is shrinking. And shrinking in this manner, it simply means that your developmental partners that comes to South Africa to support the HIV program, they have their own indicators to say this is what you need to focus on, which when you go down into the ground, I'm not saying all of them, you go down into the ground, you realize that this is not what we need, but this is what we need. And telling a funder to say this is what it's a key issue, they are basing their funding based on research. We're basing our funding and program development based on the realities of
on what you see on the ground.
Yeah, so it becomes a problem. You realized a year ago, as the Treatment Action Company, were one of those who wanted to close down because of resources. I'm just asking myself how was going to be this conference if we had closed down then, which is a key issue. I think this is a call to all the funders, your corporate partners, to say we seriously need to find ways of having sustainable funding in the country and within the SADC, because we still need, for us to end AIDS, we need to have people who will speak truth to power.
Now that you say that, in researching this topic, I came across a very poignant question that went something like, remind me again, how close are we to finding a cure for HIV and AIDS?
I think we need to forget about this PR exercise that is happening within the cyberspace and all that. We need to focus on reality. I mean, earlier on, you and I were engaging on the 1990, and part of that I told you that some of the 90s are easy to reach. Some, not that we support, but we need to understand the roadmap on how is this other 90s going to be reached. Because you can have 90% of population tested, and those tested positive remaining on treatment.
Let's just take this call. At least people are listening to us. Let's take this call from Michelle from Grahamstown. Good afternoon and welcome to Rights and Recourse. Good afternoon, ma'am. Are you there? Yes, can you ask your question?
Yes, I am, yes.
Yes, can you ask your question?
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good afternoon. I just want to say this here. I think
Ms. Shelley, you can switch off your TV.
Somebody. Oh, okay. All right.
We don't have much time.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. I just want to say these few words. Maybe there is somebody who can listen very carefully, especially people who have been affected by this epidemic. I want to say, what killed the people when this epidemic appeared? People were frightened and very hopeless. I say this, immediately the people were told that they got this epidemic.
I think we apologize. Let's apologize. We apologize for the line down there from Ms. Shelley from Grahamstown. I don't know whether you want to have final words to say, Mukelan.
My final words would be to say, for those who look at HIV as business, let's not forget to invest on HIV, because for those who are looking at it as business, for those who are funding HIV program, let's understand the dynamics in the communities, and let's allow the civil society organization to shape the programs. For the Department of Education, I think we need to work together in ensuring that we listen to each other in the process, because there's a gap between the policy makers and the policy implementation. When the policy is produced and it's flagged on media by the minister, when you go to the local level, it's something we do not see. So let's work together in ensuring that the policies reach the ground and the implementation take place. For the civil society that are not representing anyone, let's try by all means to represent the civil society voice so that we're able to respond to this epidemic.
I'm Galani, national organizer from the TAC. Thank you very much for your time. You actually said our date here. We were expecting the Department of Sport. We started this program with a quote from the minister, and we are closing it with another quote from the same article. He concludes his article by saying, I quote, HIV is a disease that has presented unique challenges to our young democracy at a time when we are also faced with other challenges. AIDS hits where it hurts most, adults in the prime of their lives. To deal with this challenge requires immense social effort. Although we are only halfway there, I believe South Africa has the energy and creativity to run the second half of the marathon and end the HIV epidemic by 2030. Close quote. This program is repeated at 5 on Wednesday morning. You can also find us on YouTube. You can continue tweeting from all of us in the studio. Thank you to our guests, and goodbye.
News Today keeps you informed with news locally and around the world.
When Judge John Hlophe challenged the Supreme Court of Appeal when it sent the matter back and said that there must be an inquiry set up.
We unpack business news.
There's an increase in general inflation in the country.
We give you up-to-date news of the day.
The drugs were seized at several locations in Sydney, including a shipping container sent from Hong Kong. Police say it's the largest haul of illicit drugs in 2 years.
We round up sports news.
Kotata, tell me about the legacy that you would like to build and be remembered for.
Trying to get my foundation running, which is going to focus on, all the sport, doesn't matter disability or able body. So, I'm passionate about sports.
Stay informed every Monday to Friday from 3 to 5:30 p.m. CAT. SABC News.